All right, good evening, and welcome to November 19th School Board meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Romano, roll call.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Present.
Mr. Rudy.
Present.
Mr. Schaff.
Present.
Mrs. Delaney.
Present.
Mr. Chumley.
Present.
All present.
Mr. Romano, do we have any cards?
There
this
are
evening?
no speakers.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of minutes.
The minutes listed is for October 26th through 2020. It's recommended to approve the minutes as presented.
You've heard the recommendation of Mr. Romano. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Chumley, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Rudy, discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes,
5 yes.
motion approved.
Thank you. It
Treasurer's
continues.
business?
The first item is item 4.01, the donations. There are two of them this evening. First is from E.C. Nuri Funeral Homes. They donated 400 Halloween goodie bags to Holly Hill Elementary for the students over Halloween. The second item is from Matern North America. They donated 5,000 applesauce pouches to child nutrition for the students in the district. It's recommended to approve those donations.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Schaff. Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mr. Schaff,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes,
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
5 yes.
motion approved.
Thank you. Item 4.02 are the financial statements, bills paid for the previous month of October, and the investments and other documents as presented. It's recommended to approve the financial statements, those bills, investments, and other reports as listed for October.
Okay. You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schaff, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Chumley. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Schaff,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes,
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
5 yes.
motion approved.
Thank you. The next item is item 4.03, and we're pretty happy and proud that this came through. It's a resolution authorizing a memorandum of understanding with the Board of Clermont County Commissioners. A little bit of history on this. And I believe it was late October, early November, we were notified by the county that there would be some availability of CARES Act funds from the county to the schools within the county. They requested the district to put a proposal together for that. In fact, all the districts within the county, including the non-public schools. The leadership team put a proposal together for that, submitted it to the county. The county did come back and distributed collectively over $1 million, or they are distributing collectively $1 million to the school districts. Our amount of that is $271,000, which we're proud to receive to do that. With that, the county is asking that we sign a memorandum of understanding, which really identifies the conditions for us spending that money. It's very similar to the CARES funding, in fact, the same that we have had in the past. The conditions are that the expenses be between the month of July 1, and we expend those funds by December 30th and submit for reimbursement to the county for that. So I would request that the board approve the resolution authorizing the superintendent and treasurer to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Board of Clermont County Commissioners for the use of CARES Act funds as authorized by Clermont County.
Okay. Thank you. You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Rudy, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Schaff. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mr. Schaff?
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney?
Yes.
Mr. Chumley?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes,
5 yes.
motion approved.
I'm going to take the lead on the next item on the treasurer's business. I would like to move item 4.04, which is a resolution of recognition and appreciation to the Clermont County Commissioners and Clermont County Health Department. I'd like to make it a resolution of and by the board, and I need a second.
Second.
Mrs. Delaney. Before we go to discussion, I'm going to let Mr. Romano read some of the resolution for us.
Okay, this is a resolution of recognition and appreciation to the Board of Clermont County Commissioners and Clermont County Public Health Department. Whereas the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted the everyday lives globally, including the community, business, and citizens of Clermont County, Ohio, and whereas the disruption has driven the West Clermont Local School District and community to come together to keep students, staff, and all stakeholders physically, socially, and emotionally safe. And whereas the district continues to seek creative and innovative ways to protect students, staff, and all those entering school facilities. And whereas a condition of students to learn is to provide them with a safe and supportive learning environment. And whereas the Board of Clermont County Commissioners, with a spirit of leadership, community, and concern, have taken the initiative to make funds available to all school districts within the county, including West Clermont Local School District, to combat the COVID-19 spread and support the continuation of learning. And whereas the Clermont County Public Health Department has provided guidance, direction, and support to the community, and specifically to K-12 school districts to keep schools the safest public place for school-aged children. Now therefore be it resolved, the West Clermont Local School District Board of Education recognizes and appreciates the leadership and community-minded concern of the Board of Clermont County Commissioners and their respective staff for supporting our schools both financially and in spirit. And be it further resolved, the West Clermont Local School District Board of Education recognizes and appreciates the leadership and diligence of the Clermont County Public Health Department for coordinating and directing the guidance and procedures to keep our schools a safe and supportive learning environment.
Thank you. Now we'll have discussion. Anybody have anything?
Nope, I think it's great, timely. We definitely appreciate their efforts.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Anything further?
We wouldn't be where we are today without collaborating with them, and Mrs. Adams is always telling us that they are always communicating firsthand immediately to make things better
Yep.
for us so we can be successful and have our kids where they need to be.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I would just add that, I mean, we've had a long history of collaboration with other government entities, including Union Township and other townships in the county and the state, and, I'm sure this recognition is, ties in with the CARES funding, but, I mean, it's long past due because of all of the services the county provides, including the sheriff and all that. This recognition is definitely long overdue.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Mr. Romano?
Call the roll. Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Item 4.05 is the 2020-21 amending the appropriations and supplementing the appropriations. This really is reflective of that $271,000. So in order for us to spend it, we did amend our certificate of estimated resources to have the authority to spend the money. We're amending the annual appropriation measure. So the recommendation is for the board to approve the resolution supplementing and amending the annual appropriations for fiscal year 2021 as presented.
For the recommendation of the treasurer, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schaff, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Rudy. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Schaff?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney?
Yes.
Mr. Chumley?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Item 4.06 is a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of tax anticipation notes. We'll get into this a little bit more too with our 5-year forecast, but as I had mentioned in previous board meetings, and I believe former treasurer Sininger noted that we're going to have a low cash flow point. Even though we passed that levy, we don't start collecting those funds until after January 1. So the low point is going to be around January 15th, which is a payroll date. So it's requesting that we have the ability to issue those notes between January 15th, plus or minus that date, but also to mature those notes before June 30th. So it's a short-term borrowing within the fiscal year. So that resolution provides us the authority to go out and issue those notes. One of the things it does allow us to do is to go direct, if we can get a better rate that way. So that is in this resolution. We are utilizing the services of Bradley Rue with Dinsmore. He's the bond counsel that the district has been using, and the financial advisors will be Bradley Payne, who we have used those in the past too with this issuance. So the recommendation is to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of tax anticipation notes.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. I'll put that on the floor in the form of a motion and ask for a second.
Second.
Mr. Chumley? Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes?
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
Thank you. I will keep the board informed on that. It is, we're going to issue the notes up to 11.5 million. That probably won't be the amount. It'll be something less than that. But as we get near that time period of what our need is, I'll make sure the board is aware of that and how those proceeds go with it. Item number 4.07 is a resolution approving a 5-year financial forecast. I do have a presentation for that, if I could. And I will get that up on the screen for us. All right, to do that. And if it's okay, can I go up to that? It would be easier for me to do on that podium with it.
Wouldn't be a presentation if someone wasn't standing at the podium.
And I'll give the superintendent the hook, so that way, in case I'm up here way too long, she just can yank that thing and I'll go through it.
Check.
Go with it. To do it. And make sure this is on. Okay. So the first thing that I want to do, and I'm going to take this mask off if that's okay, is give some recognition and give some thanks for it. And not that, in the coming week it's going to be Thanksgiving, but I think there's 3 things that, as I put this forecast together, that we're kind of thankful for. Number one, and we continually say it, but it is thanking the residents for the passage of that levy. I can't imagine what this forecast would be without that levy passage. In fact, I can't imagine what we would be doing in the months of June, July, August, September, having another levy or doing some other things or cutting the budget if that hadn't passed. So up front first, before even the forecast starts, is to thank the residents for that. Secondly, and again, I don't think sometimes we say this enough, I know we appreciate the work of our staff, the teachers, the classified staff, everyone involved for the work they do every day. But one of the things they did this summer, which has a great impact on this forecast, is they understood our financial realities. We had negotiations this past year. For the last couple of years, those negotiations have been a year at a time, which, in past history, that's been uncommon. Usually it's 2 or 3 years. Both of those bargaining units, took a 0. Okay, the only increase were step increases that they had. That was significant. That was significant to this forecast. It was significant right after passing the levy. Okay, and so a huge thanks goes out to all of our employees for that. Third thing is to the Board of Education, the superintendent, and her leadership team. There were commitments made during that levy, and that has been a continual focus of this team. It's been an ongoing focus for years on the budget, to keep the budget down, keep within the spending. One of the things that levy did for us, it's covered spending deficits that we had for several years, okay, including this year, okay, to go forward with it. So it's important to me to know that the board is committed to it, that the leadership of this district is committed to maintaining and keeping the promise that through fiscal year 24, that we're gonna keep that budget whole. We're gonna stay in tune with that. And I know that commitment was made, so we're gonna go forward with that, to do that. So the three things out of the way with it. So what is this 5-year forecast? And it's not the first time that you approved it, but just want to make clear, it is a management planning tool, okay? It's not our budget. It's reflective of our budget. It's reflective of 3 years of actual history of what we're currently doing this year, but it's also looking out, 4 years up the road to say, where will we be? If I could redefine the definition of a 5-year forecast, I would call it financing our future, because it's all about how we educate kids. If we really believe they're our future, that's what we're financing right now with it. We're required to file that document twice a year, November 30th and May 31st. It is a projection. So when we come up in December and January and February and we come up to that second 5-year forecast in May, and someone says, well, why are we different? Because it was a projection, because we got new information, and things are going to change, okay? If my projection hits that number exactly, and it's not my projection, it's collectively our projection, okay, then it's by chance that happened, okay? We put all our best efforts forward to do that, okay? The other thing, it guides our ability to sign a certificate, okay? So as we get contracts and different things over the year, we first look at that. If we have to go beyond 1 year, like an employee agreement, okay, we have to look at that agreement to make sure, or look at the 5-year forecast to make sure it's in tune with it. What are some of the highlights, overview of this? We built in the levy collections, $11.5 million. Recall that we only get half of it this fiscal year, right? The first half collection from January to June. Second, it reflects the cuts that the state had to do because of the pandemic. Okay, they issued those in May, 2 months left in fiscal year 20, and then again, they cut this current year budget. Okay, that was the 2-year biennium for that. Over $3 million of cuts that we had to absorb. When you think about that, up to this time period, we're only going to gain half of the $11.5 million through June 30th of 21, and before we even started collecting it, we lost $3.4 million. Okay, so 2 steps up, 1 step back. We project for fiscal years 22 through 25, and again, that's 2 new bienniums, right? It's the 22-23 biennium, 2 years, 24-25. We're projecting and believing that the state will at least come back and create the level of funding they did in FY19 for that. So that is in this projection. Okay, we are maintaining the expenses at a continuation level. That doesn't mean that the budget doesn't increase. It means that the programs that we have put in place, the staffing that we haven't put in place, we continually still try to improve them, okay, but we're continuing those forward. It also responds to COVID-19, okay? There were additional expenses that we had with that, and not only additional expenses, I think you heard the superintendent say it before, is we made a commitment, or making a commitment, that as we spend those dollars, we want to turn those into an investment. That as we face this pandemic, we're going to come out better and do that. So that's built into the projection too. Even with the additional revenue, okay, this year is tight because we're covering the deficit spending that the district had been doing for some time period. What's that mean? That means that our cash balance, beginning of the year, throughout the year, and the end of the year, is lower than what we want it to be. We just passed a resolution to give me authority to go out and borrow funds within the year. That's a direct result of that low cash balance, okay, with that, to do that. Revenues versus expenditures. So what's it mean to our bottom line with it? If you look at the chart, okay, which is reflection of that 5-year forecast, going back to the fiscal year, the actual 2018, all the way through 21, we've been deficit spending, okay? Revenues exceeded expenditures. That means it's been a drain on our cash balance. Through this forecast, and we always knew this was tight, right? Through the forecast, there's really only one time period that our revenues exceed the expenditures, okay? So we're adding back the cash balance. And then there's 1 year, the 23 year, we're kind of balanced. Revenues and expenditures equal, okay? And my definition of that on a budget that, is approaching 100 million, right? Between 80 and 90 million, that if we're within $1 million, that's pretty close to balancing revenue and expenditures together. When we go out past 24 and 25, that's when that spread between revenue and expenditures starts expanding again. That's where in FY '25, we remain balanced through '24, that was our commitment, okay? Whatever we can do to improve that, we'll do, okay? But we got to start looking at something again. I'm just reminded of the Finance Committee meeting that we had in October, all right?
Yep.
Mr. Schaff, Mrs. Delaney, and we spent some time at the end of the meeting. Mr. Schaff brought up, we can't just communicate to the public our finances pre-levy time. It needs to be a continuous impact to do that. So part of our efforts isn't just around the 5-year forecast time, just isn't around, the end of the year. We've got to continually be communicating with the public. Superintendent put together a key communicators committee. We've got the Business Advisory Committee. We've got other groups that we're going to be communicating our finances to. Wherever I can get on the docket, we'll let people know. We're not going to wait until 3 or 4 years up the road to do that with that. The chart just shows the true days cash. And if you really look at this chart, it really represents the balances, okay? The 2 years that we're going to have to borrow are in FY '21, this current year. And if we kind of look ahead, FY '24 is going to be another tight year cash-wise. Get the additional cash from the revenues exceeding expenses in '22, but then we deplete that down, okay? So somewhere up the road, I'm going to talk about a policy of maintaining a minimum cash balance, okay? That's not to hide money, that's not to secure money. What that really is for is so that we can maintain a minimum level, okay, of cash on hand to do that for our operations. Revenue sources, where's our money coming from? Because of that levy passage, we got an additional, half year of the $11.5 million. There's that growth in local funding, now up to 57.24%, the state at 42.76%, okay? If you want to look at a partnership of funding schools, okay, we're starting because of that levy passage, our local share is growing more than the state share. If you look at what's been happening on the state revenue over the last 3 or 4 years and into the future, it's flat, except for the dip down, okay, that we had in FY '20 and this current year, FY '21. All we built into it, because we don't know anymore, for '22, '23, and forward, is going back to the level of FY '19, okay? We're not going to whether that happens, okay? So we have to look at that. If we look at the chart, how that expands over time, with that, again, what we see is our local revenue, FY '18, '19, and '20, kind of flat, right? The provisions of House Bill 920 kind of keep things flat on local revenue. But we also see the state revenue during that time period shrink down a little bit, mainly because of COVID-19, okay? FY '21, the new millage comes in, our local revenue grows. We get the full effect of that millage in FY '22, and then local revenue flattens out, okay? The growth that we get is going to be with new construction and because we're at the 20 mil floor. Okay, so we're going to get some growth in there, okay? It's hard to predict. We know this year there was the reval, the sexennial reval by the county, so we should get some growth within that or see some growth within that as we go forward. But again, the blue line, the blue bar, that's the state funding, that's flat, okay? By FY '22, the shift from the share is almost like a 60-40 split. 60% local, 40% by the state, okay? So kind of remember that effort there to maybe a call of action coming up the road. So what are the uncertainties on the revenues? And not just uncertainties, maybe some challenges, but maybe some opportunities too, okay? One, the balance between local economic development options, i.e. tax exemptions, and district local revenue growth to both commercial, industrial, and residential property. So with the new valuations, we need to look at that, okay? We really need to that assessment was done. We've been looking at every year the changes in the valuations. I don't know if that's a challenge or an opportunity, but we have to continually look at that, I already know that there's going to be some challenges with the commercial industrial property. Okay, we have got to go do that. There is a balance though, right, between, we're recovering from the finances of the pandemic in the community, so we've got to look at that too. There's an economic growth aspect to it too. House Bill 161, that was the last biennium. It was primarily flat, but then it got cut. So we went from flat to being cut. The uncertainty is, what's the new biennium going to bring us? With the OSBA Capital Conference previous week or two, okay, you probably heard a lot about the fair funding, okay, the proposal with that. You heard a lot about school choice, okay, the voucher program. Those are two areas that we have to look at, okay? The analysis I did with the fair funding, I believe that there needs to be a formula, okay? But I also believe that this district needs to benefit from it, okay? And right now, I'm not seeing that, okay? And if that's going to cost the state nearly $2 billion, okay? Go back to the slide that says our fair share of things, okay? We need to advocate for that to get it. It's also dependent on how fast the state can recover. In the notes of the 5-year forecast, we did look at the state budget, and it appears to be recovering very well. Okay, the tax revenue collections, are exceeding the expectations that were there before. Okay. The other thing is our ability to look at alternative funding. Okay, sometimes at some school districts they breathe that sigh of relief after a levy passes and kind of sails. We can't do that. That's not where we're at. Okay, well, where we're at is we need to continually look at alternative sources for that. We need to use the groups that the superintendent put together, have them help us look at different funding sources with that, aside from state and local. Okay, how are we spending that money? Okay, 69% of our budget, okay, is for wages and benefits. Okay, that's not out of line. You'll hear districts say that theirs is between 78 and 85. Don't forget that our transportation is provided through purchase services. That's why our purchase service is a little bit higher than most school districts. Okay, our substitute costs are through the county, so that's a purchase service. Okay, so we are within the norm of the other school districts. Okay, that's not as low comparatively to it. We're in range with that. There were some additions to the budget that we looked at, okay, with the money, the CARES money that we received from the county. We're looking at using that money, although it's going to be in a separate fund. The proposal we put together was really to enhance our instructional program so that there is some flexibility of face-to-face, online, remote, to go into that. That's an investment, okay, we're putting into that. There's some staff additions that I've built into that, 2 in 21, 4 in 22, 2 in 23, primarily for enrollment growth. Although we may have taken a dip this year, that was due to, right now as much as I see it, that was due to students opting out for the online charter schools. Okay, but I believe after this year we can get those students back and should get those students back. Okay, but when I sat through a discussion last week about our enrollment and the economy is recovering and the housing market is tight, right? Not a lot of supply. As it recovers, that's going to increase as houses go up, as real estate turns over. That brings students to us. Okay, so we need to be aware of that. So some of that was built into this projection for that. Okay, with it. So if we just look over time, the different components of our expenditures, gradually each of those little sections of the bar, there's not drastic jumps in it. But cumulatively, when you look over the period of time, it's a pretty steady growth, okay? And that growth typically and naturally in school districts outpaces the revenue. You go back. Revenue locally is kind of flat till you pass a levy, then it steps up, goes flat again. Revenues from the state, every 2 years, there's a decision made, okay? So look at the last biennium, we were flat, went down. We're hoping it goes back up to the other levels, okay? So we're constantly trying to battle inflation, improve our programs, which, we have to do some things to that. And we had the added cost of COVID-19. The cost in the general fund, because we did get money, the CARES money and other money, I think a lot of the cost in the general fund is how we change our program. Going, all the plans to go remote when we need to, like we had to this week, okay, with that. They're not big costs, but they are costs in there to do some of these things with it. The uncertainties under the expenses, okay. Certainly COVID-19 was a disruption to us, okay. We had to do some other things differently, okay. How we educate kids, ask a teacher, it's different. There's continued pressure on staffing, especially our ability to get substitutes, okay. It's a supply and demand, and our supply went up. The demand on our demand for substitutes went up. The supply, because of the composition of that pool, went down. So that's a struggle. It's a constant struggle for us, okay? Inflation, some of the unknowns that we have is what is really this pandemic going to have on supplies, materials, purchase services, and equipment. We already know the impact that it has on equipment. 2 major delays, right? Getting tablets for the students, okay? And I am, as the demand for equipment goes up, so does that cost. I don't know if those costs are going to stay or they're going to go down in the future, okay? But that's something that's a challenge to us. And the other one is, as we just talked about, was the enrollment growth, okay? Study's going to be done in January. I think we're going to get an update on enrollment in January.
Yeah.
And so, we need to look in future years how that's going to impact our cost. So enrollment growth doesn't just impact staffing, it impacts the program, it impacts facilities with that. Revenue versus expenditures, okay, that's what's going to create our spending surplus or our spending deficit. That's the big thing that I look at, okay? You've got cash, but are we going to add to it or take away from it, okay? We have been taking away from it, okay? The levy helps us add to it, not this year, but a year up the road, okay? But we're still covering, that imbalance with it. So we have to look at that. Again, our ending cash balance, and if you see on there, we are good through FY24. I will also tell you that as time goes on, one of our challenges is that fiscal stress and distress, okay? That's why we need to continually look at the budget. Here's the 3 areas. The local taxes, we know, are kind of set. We're going to get some growth with it. The big unknown is the state funding, okay? That's what I'm waiting to hear on. Unfortunately, we're really not going to hear about that till, we could hear about that in January or February, but things won't be settled till May or June. Historically, that's when it happens, okay? So we need to continue to look at that. As we get closer to FY24, okay, there is some significant financial distress on it. As of now, unless there's some remedy funding-wise or budget-wise, okay, which is kind of the last resort we want to do, okay, we've got to do something on additional revenue, okay, out to 25 to do that. We can't go zero, okay, we can't have a zero cash balance or can't go below that, so we need to look at that. I pretty much just went over those uncertainties to cash, okay, and the expenses. I didn't get too deep into the numbers, okay, you have that report. Not a lot of significant changes from May, okay, except from some of the impact of the expenses we had and some of the revenue, okay. My main focus is not taking things a year at a time, but the horizon of FY24. So the one big budget of FY21 through FY24 is what I'm looking at, okay, through multiple years, is to make sure we keep that commitment to do it. If there's some call to action, okay, keep that commitment top of mind, okay, that we stay positive with it. On the revenue, we need to be advocates locally okay, property values, if there's any tax exemptions going through, okay, TIFs, we need to participate, okay? And we need to explain our case to it. If there's a housing development that someone wants to put a TIF on, we need to react to that, okay? Houses bring children, okay? Children bring costs, okay? We need to respond to that. We need to be advocates at the state level, okay? We need our fair share. There's no question that there needs to be a funding formula that's fair, okay? But there also needs a funding formula that gives some growth to our district too with that, okay? So we've got to advocate for that. We need to continue to look for the alternative revenue sources, okay? Every little bit helps, okay? The donations that we had today, those are significant. Those impact things a lot. But we also need to look at bigger ticket things too. We need to use our committees, to get some bigger efforts. We need to go, maybe with those committees, do some grant writing, okay, to get some additional sources of funding for different things, okay? We need to continue to explore how we spend our dollars. I know, I love working with the leadership team, and they have great ideas of what to do, and those ideas cost money. We also have to look at, okay, if we want something new, are there some things we need to let or could let go of, okay? This is we have a tight budget. I mean, it is, I don't know what other words to use, but it is tight, okay? You already know that. I don't have to explain that to you. We need to, with the budget process, look at building a budget, not just rolling it over, okay? If we get into that mode, then all of a sudden I think we can look closer at what are our priorities and what can we let go of, because it may be better to fund something new, okay, and different with that. As Mr. Schaff pointed out in the Finance Committee, we need to keep our constituents informed, not just informed, but involved with us, okay? I love the fact that the superintendent, with the committee structures that we have, one of the first objectives with those committees is how do we grow them? How do we get more participation within that? Maybe we don't want a big committee, but maybe we want subcommittees to get more people involved with that. That's going to help us out, okay? They're going to give us the ideas of where to go and what to do. The last thing, and I think this is more of a mindset with anything, and maybe it's the pandemic that did it, is whether it is keeping on toe through FY24, whether it is, sustaining, our face-to-face and going remote so that we continue the student learning. We need to shift from hoping we can do these things to believing we can do these things and having the will to do it, okay? And, that is a progressive thing, right? When I took the job and I looked at finances first, my first thing was, well, I hope we can do it. And then as you dig into it, no, I believe we can do it. I wouldn't stand up here and tell you that we're committed through FY24 if I didn't believe it, okay? What follows that is our will to make sure we do that, okay? So it's a little bit more than numbers. I apologize, and I didn't get yanked off, so it must have been okay with time with that. But do you have any questions about the forecast?
One question I have is, at what point do we start considering scenarios for after FY24? I mean, obviously, next year, the five-year forecast is going to include 25 and 26, and those numbers are going to keep going down. So at what point do we start considering, what types of levies are we going to look at? If we're going to do a levy, what do we need to do? What kind of cuts? I don't want to, just have a forecast that shows us going down and then not really, have contingencies. You know what I mean?
No, that's a good question, and the time to do that isn't in 24, right?
Right.
Okay, because the point that you added was not just about going back, but how do we go back? What type do we go back? We go back, we've been going back, and most districts in this state have going back for emergency levies, right? Because they're, quote, emergency, and two, they're time limited, right? 5 years, 10 years to do that, okay? Needless to say, we need something more permanent, too, with that. So do we do property tax? Do we do an income tax? What types of things do we do? If we have facilities, right? The last one was really pay-as-you-go, right? We moved the inside millage. Do we do a bond issue? So your question is, when do we start doing that?
Now.
We start doing it now with the understanding that between now and '24, the unknown is what's the state going to do?
Right.
Okay, how can we come back to that? Okay? Certainly, I'm not going to hide with it. We've got negotiations coming up. Okay, they're year by year. Okay? If we take very seriously attracting and retaining staff, we've got to give some consideration to that. Okay? I mean, we thank them up front for what they did this year, but there's a reality there too with that. So we can't wait. And I think the involvement of the community and our constituents, the informing them, involving them, they'll help give us some direction too of what, they'll have not just the ability, but the willingness to do.
Well, and to your point there, Mr. Romano, if we're going to deviate from what a normal levy would be, that our community is aware of, they're informed about, they understand, if we're going to deviate from that and consider an income tax levy, you're going to have time to campaign for that, but you're going to also need time to educate so that those can be brought up to speed on, the benefits and how their family is impacted by that, and, get the word out so it doesn't seem like a backdoor or a sneak
Right.
attack or something like that along those lines. The last campaign, we heard a lot of people saying, y'all should try an income tax levy. Well, by the time it was even a thought of, a consideration, we were in a desperate need of something.
Yeah.
We didn't have the time to prepare for that. So I appreciate the fact that, if we're gonna do something in 2024 or 25, we start talking about what exactly it is that we might consider. And
And
it's,
there's a lot of education with that, and that's a good point. I mean, the optimum is, right, the two things that we need to know is what's the willingness and the amount, and how do they want to pay it? How do people want to pay it? The optimum way is for them to tell us, we know and understand that additional funds are needed. This is how we want to pay for it. Now, that's very optimum, but as you state, we can't wait till '24. And for a community to make that decision, they need to know and understand what that is. Okay? If they don't understand it, you and I, we know what the answer is going to be, right?
right.
If you don't understand something, you're not going forward with it. Okay, so that's important to do.
Well, last time we tried an income tax, it went down 70-30.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
I
it
think
was.
I was the chairperson of that levy back in the day. I wasn't even on the board.
That
then.
is not a reflection of you.
No,
I
but
didn't know that.
We did a
when
lot
it-
of
but-
communication, and
Yeah.
we targeted our audience to the older generation who are on fixed incomes, and it was an alternate 1%, which means that they would not be taxed for their Social Security and things like that. It still wasn't enough, and we thought we did a good job at communicating. It wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right place. It was just not. And that set us back quite a bit because we needed to pass something,
Right.
and we failed.
I mean,
So-
I can imagine that, somebody out there listening, we may scare them that we're talking about that now already. But again, as you bring up, you don't want to wait to '24 to talk about it, all right? So, I mean, our whole ability to start talking about it is being transparent about it,
Absolutely.
okay? Let them know what our situation is.
Yep. Good. Thank you. All
Any
right,
other questions?
thank you.
Thank you.
We've got to act on that. My big fear was I do the presentation and then we would just keep moving and never act on anything. So, let me put this away. Nope. Did I do that right?
Look at you.
I want to get this. And bear with me 1 minute as I move this back out there. All right. So we are at item number 4.07, which is a resolution approving the 5-year forecast or the recommendation for the approval of the five-year forecast as presented.
Thank you. You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Rudy, and seconded by Mr. Chumley. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes.
Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion
Thank you. And I would say that I have comments, but I think I made enough comments at that podium, and if that's okay, we could move on to the superintendent's business.
Perfect. Superintendent's business.
Item 5.01, personnel, I'll be sharing that today for Dr. Foltz. You'll see in your packet, we have some resignations for 3 of our staff members and then 2 retirements that are being announced for a future date. We also have recommendations for the classified staff employment. We've added some clinic assistants, paraprofessionals, computer tech. Supplemental contracts listed are the mentor program. That's the lion's share of it, both the mentors as well as the facilitators, some clubs and activities. You will notice in there a tennis coach, and it seems like tennis is over. Why are we hiring this? This is a course correction based on the JED and the payment, so that's why that's in there. There are study table stipends as well. Or sorry, supplementals, I misspoke. Substitute personnel have been added. We have some unpaid leave as well as some school volunteers. We have stipends that are based on mentors for local universities, the WCEA leadership, our health insurance committee, and there are also some club and activities on the very last page. So we ask that you approve the personnel agenda as presented.
You've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schaff, and a second? Second. Mrs. Delaney, discussion?
I'd just like to give a word out for Mrs. Pello. I worked with her. She's a wonderful teacher, and it will be a loss.
Both of my boys have had her, and she's a fantastic teacher.
Yes.
So I agree with you. Anything further? Roll call?
Thank you. Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved.
Item 5.2 is asking for you to approve the resolution for authorization to contract with Rachel Wixie and Associates, as well as cross-county staffing. As you know, we are challenged with the supply and demand of substitutes for all levels of employees in our school system. And what this would allow us to do would be to contract with an additional third party, in addition to the ones we are using right now, as a way to close that gap. And so we are asking that we are able to enter into that contract with those 2 organizations that we believe will make a big impact moving forward for our ability to cover when our staff is not able to be with us. It is, traditionally, we work with Hamilton County as our supply for our substitutes, and just with, they are down compared to normal, and then here in Clermont County, we're even down further. And so it's truly creating a strain on our system. This was a problem when I first came. This is not a brand-new problem. It's just exacerbated under the COVID-19 conditions. And some of that really, it's a lot of our quality subs that we've counted on for years are retired teaching staff in that critical age range. So I'm recommending that you approve the resolution for authorization to contract with Rachel Wixie and Associates and cross-county staffing for this school year.
You've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Rudy, and it's seconded by Mr. Chumley. Discussion?
So this would be a continuing contract. This isn't just once COVID, and I don't want to say is over, but is down and
I
we're
think
back to kind of normal.
We would evaluate it. It certainly could become a long-term relationship. We're not dissatisfied with the contracts that we're in or anything.
Right.
We're just trying to supplement and add to it. So it could be a possibility, yes.
Well, and I mean, because it seems like if this was a an issue before COVID, which COVID just exacerbated the issue, that if this was an issue before COVID was even involved, that when COVID isn't as much of a factor, that this would help alleviate some of that issue anyway.
Certainly.
Yeah,
Anything
that's
further?
it.
Roll call?
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mr. Chumley?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
Mr. Schaff?
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney?
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved.
On item 5.03, you'll see a resolution to approve an MOU regarding overflow West Clermont Online Academy instruction pay to be approved as presented. And just to give you an example of what we're talking about here, we have in some situations, this is just a for instance, where a special education educator is going on family leave, maternity leave, and it's very challenging at this time to get a qualified special educator to be a sub and to go online, to the online academy. So that's like a double challenge. And so what instead we're doing is paying our staff who are willing to go above and beyond the work hours to give the specialized design instructional minutes and fulfill the requirements of the IEP. So that's just one example of how our brick and mortar teachers are picking up WCOA overflow. And so that's what we're asking, is that you approve the MOU regarding overflow of WCOA instruction as presented.
You've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Delaney, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Schaff? Discussion? Hearing none, roll call?
Mrs. Delaney?
Yes.
Mr. Schaff?
Yes.
Mr. Chumley?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Motion-
5 yes.
Motion approved.
The next item, 5.04, resolution authorizing employees to administer medication to students in school. This would be an expansion of our policy to include principals, assistant principals, teachers, building administrative assistants, paraprofessionals, and as well as the school nurse and health aides that are already approved on this list, to expand our ability to support the functioning of the health centers, especially in this time of training. So in consulting with our legal, they recommended that we bring this upgrade to our policy to your attention tonight. So I ask that you approve the resolution authorizing employees to administer medication to students in school. Of course, they have to be trained to do so. It's not just by title. There's training involved. But this would help us be able to more productively keep school up and running in our challenged, overworked health clinics that exist at the moment.
Okay. You've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. I'll ask for a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Chumley?
Second.
Mrs. Delaney? Discussion?
So is this changing the policy?
It's the same policy with more people on the list that
Okay.
could be trained and be able to help out.
So what my question was getting to is, does it need to go through the policy type, consider it a first reading, or consider it an emergency, or
No.
I'm not sure of the procedural is
No,
what
we're
I'm
able to
getting.
do it through resolution
Yeah,
to
okay.
take care of this immediate need.
All right, so that was my procedural question.
that's-
My next question deals with I think my concern of this, is just too many hands in the pillbox. How do we alleviate?
Yeah, well, this isn't gonna turn into like everybody's coming in then for work. This is in a significant situation, like just like yesterday, where I'm having layers and layers and layers of people missing, and we're having to like step in and secure it. By policy, it needs to be a nurse and it needs to be a health aide. And when those people are no longer in the story, we need another plan. And so this would not be to make it chaotic and to change up daily business. This would be for emergency situations.
Okay,
Great question, thank you.
yeah,
And I completely understand the situation, that if you don't have somebody to administer insulin to a child before their lunch meal, what do you do? And for somebody to be trained to do that, and it's a principal or somebody along those lines, it makes the child be able to stay at school and conduct business as we know it, without the risk of.
Now, to be
having a
clear
policy.
in this policy, just since you mentioned the diabetics, this is not for the more intensive, this is more of just like the pill medication.
I gotcha.
So we would still need that high level of training for those kinds of instances. So it's a step in the right direction. It helps us, but it doesn't solve every medical problem, though.
I gotcha.
Thank
Okay.
you, but thank you for saying that.
Would this resolution include coverage of such an item as an EpiPen or, some sort of, something that, if there was an emergency that happened and, peanut allergy or whatever?
Yes, those kinds of medications.
Okay.
Yep,
Thank you.
and thank you.
Anything further?
No.
Roll call?
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes?
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved.
So you can see this agenda is chock full with layers of support in our most recent situations here that we're facing. Item 5.05 is compliance with the nutritional standards report. This is something that we bring to you every year, and it's just acknowledgement and information for you that reads, West Clermont Local Schools meets the nutrition standards for all foods sold in school as required by the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 for the 2020-21 school year. So that is just for your information. No action required. Item 5.06 is revised policy approval. We brought all of these policies forward to you in the last meeting for the first reading. And what I want to share, the only changes that have been made since you saw it last is that we recognize that correct names were in the anti-harassment policies, but there were some incorrect titles based on our recent changes, so that needed to be cleaned up. So that's the only change there, that corrected title. So we are asking that you approve the policies as presented.
You've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Rudy, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Chumley? Discussion?
No.
Hearing none. Roll call.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Schaff,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved.
And item 5.07, I'm going to ask that Mr. Chuck LaFata join me up here. He is the new team member here on our district staff. He serves as the special education director for secondary as well as student services PK-12. And as we look to committing to excellence with every learner, every day, and every way, the focus that Mr. Chuck LaFato has on our school system certainly lives that out every day in his work. The student services that wrap around our children, that not only support them academically, social, emotionally, and in their wellness. And what we are working hard to do is to create a system here that helps all students have the necessary resources that they need to reach their full potential. And is not necessarily the same resources and the same amount of time and the same kinds of things, because the same is not equal. We're talking about equitable resources that happen for our students, and Chuck is really leading the charge in that effort and making a difference as we are continuing to break down barriers that keep our students from learning. So Chuck, thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank, well, I don't know how I have that clue out. I'll point.
He's not doing that.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Natasha and the board for bringing me on board. This is a fascinating district. I really enjoy being here, and what I enjoy more than anything is the team approach that Natasha's created. And combining special education into teaching and learning and the whole educational framework led by Ellie. That's, I got to tell you, that's kind of not the way a lot of districts do things with special education and teaching and learning. And even in my former district, they were separate. So bringing them together allows everybody to pull on the resources of other team people to help. The bottom line is, right, we want to help kids, and the social, emotional, and teaching and learning and special education and wraparound services are all about kids. That's why we're here. So this team allows us to do that. One thing I do want to say before I start this is, sitting there listening to Dan, I got knots on my stomach because I've been through that. And it's ironic that in my previous district, the numbers were very much smaller in percentages, but the problems were the same. It's kind of nice to hear other districts have the same problems. I can't imagine, I can't explain to you how many times I was in Columbus testifying for small districts with gain cap and so on. And Dan's correct with the unevenness of state funding. And it's got to change. So that's my commercial for lobbying Columbus. Okay, thank you. All right, all I'm going to do is explain my role, and then if you have questions, please ask. So my role is there. My role is within the Centers of Excellence is to lead 2 design teams, a whole child partnership and a student engagement team. And the overall goal is just to create a culture that elevates student health, social, emotional learning, improving overall student outcomes. In other words, looking at the whole child, educationally and all aspects of the child and the parents. So the whole child partnership team it's taken me a while to wrap my head around this because it involves a myriad of community partners with West Clermont. So I'm happy to say, as of last week, I've met all of them and participated in Zoom meetings or Google meetings with everybody on the board. And so now we have established regular monthly, quarterly, or half-year meetings with all the people here. So the goal is to embrace all of those partners and lead them into helping West Clermont children. So everything from suicide prevention to health source and dental screenings is what this partnership team is about. So there's some very nice people, some very aggressive people who want to lend their expertise to West Clermont. That's gratifying, and it's going to help me. So it's taken a while. I started in August, so it's taken a while to just get this together, but it's together now, and so we're going to move forward. The first item, which I'm proud to say, it's awesome. I visited Williamsburg with the dental screenings that the health source is doing. That's going to begin at Clough Pike in December, and then that will roll through March with all of the elementary buildings. And it gives it allows health source to do dental screenings of our children, and then if they need dental work or dental assistance with the parents, health source leads that. And then I'll be the liaison between health source and the principals or the buildings or the parents if those needs arise. So I'll give Natasha obviously reports, and if you want me to come back later in the winter and explain how these are going, I'd like to. Second thing is a student engagement team. The first focus on this is attendance and truancy, and that's kind of ironic now that we're in the midst of a pandemic and we got a ton of people out and a ton of people who are afraid to come to school and so on. But in talking to the attendance team, there are some habitual truants in this district, as all districts have. So those are the students that we're going to focus on first. So Nick Ayers at the high school has an aggressive plan. I'm going to help him on how we can reach out to those particularly troublesome students who historically have not come to school. We're going to move this program to the middle school because it seems like the middle school and high school have the highest percentage of those families, those students. So again, the data right now is not good. The goal is to improve the data, to get, I don't know, if say you have 30 kids who are habitual truants and you can turn 5 to 10 of them around, that's a win. So it's going to require over time, it's going to require looking at in my opinion, looking at education for those students a little bit differently. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you do have in this district, you do have some children, high school kids, who cannot get to school on time because they're being raised by a grandma, grandpa, or a single parent, and they're taking care of their siblings, their younger siblings. They're getting them off to school. And so the high school kid can't get there on time or can't get to the junior high on time. So what's a kid do? Sometimes they just don't go. They figure, heck with it, I'm not gonna do it. So those are the kind of situations we're gonna try to address and try to make school more palatable to those students by adjusting the schedule somewhat. Now, it's gonna be a tough sell, but if you can get that kid in at, instead of 6:45 at the middle school, if you can get them in at 7:45 and adjust their schedule, maybe they stay. Or at least maybe they're there half a day. Maybe they get math, maybe they get language arts. All of this is baby steps. It's not gonna happen overnight. But you have to aggressively look at it. And I have a team of 3 people with elementary, middle, and high school. And the 2 principals are on board, Randy at the high school and Ross at the middle school. We're gonna try some things. Now, all that being said, it sounds awesome, right? In the midst of a pandemic, I don't know how it's gonna work out. This might be late spring when vaccines are available and things are back to normal. But it's a plan. It's a plan. Okay, here we go. So what I've been talking about is COVID. There's some good and there's some bad. One of the coolest things is Heather Burns, district nurse, as you know, she created an appointment system. I didn't understand that at first when I first came here. But it's a student in an elementary, high school, or middle school. If they're going to go to the clinic, the teacher creates an appointment for a time period when that kid can come to the clinic. So what that's done, it's reduced the number of frequent flyers to all the clinics. Students just want to go out of class just to go to the clinic. And it's allowed the nurses or the nurse aides more time to deal with significant issues in the clinics. So that's been, I think, an unintended consequence, and I think Heather's going to stay with that going into the future. Attendance and truancy numbers, I've been over this, have increased significantly, and I've told you kind of our first plan on that. Conducting remote IEP meetings and meetings with school partners. I was on one today with with Batavia. A nice consequence of the pandemic is those meetings are all virtual now. Google or Zoom, they're more efficient. There's no travel time. You can do things with scanning, like the signing sheet for an IEP. We scanned it back and forth. We all signed it. Boom, we're done. I gave it to Sarah Jane, and we're ready to rock and roll on this kid. So that's good. I would anticipate those kind of things. The impact of COVID has necessitated that. I think it's going to, I would advocate for that continuing. The last thing is second to last thing, one member of the middle school attendance team had to be replaced this year as a result of COVID because Crystal became the contact tracer for the district. So I had to replace her at the middle school. We hired Beth Bertram, who was a sub-secretary and knows the system, knows people, and so on. And she has really made an impact in the middle school already. And then lastly, we're constantly monitoring and adapting special education service for the WCOA students. I'm working with Kim in particular at the high school. The fear is a lot of those students are going to be credit deficient when they return, and so we're working on that. Kim, not we. Kim is working on that with her team to try to prevent that with as many students as possible. The goals overall, there's long-term, short-term, continue to have an instructional focus of closing achievement and opportunity gaps for all subgroups. That's a general statement. It's part of the report card, actually. The high school and middle school aggressively contact habitually truant students, concentrating on school contacts and so on. Establish local social emotional learning pathway, completing discipline, attendance protocols. Long-term goal is to keep students in school. Establish a physical, mental health wellness team. Progress monitoring of middle school, high school IEPs, which is essential now. It's essential all the time, but it's more than essential now with COVID and remote learning. So my summation to all these goals is what I started out with. My role here, along with our team, is to look at the entire child and their growth and development. And that means a lot of things. I've gone over them fairly quickly here, but there's a summation of some of the goals. So as part of the larger educational team in this excellence configuration, that as being part of that team, that will help us. Because I can tap into elementary protocols, I can tap into curriculum protocols, and hopefully we can start making some impact on children's well-being in this district fairly quickly, especially social emotional. Current reality is I have begun, but to continue with communication with our district partners for them to become part of our district and help us. Whole Child Collaborative, I was in a meeting early on with Mike on this, with the organizational leaders out of Ohio University, actually. And Mike told me that this last year, the Whole Child Collaborative was essentially, they thought, was going to take over a lot of what we do in this district and other districts, and kind of do all these wraparound services, put them under one focus, Whole Child Collaborative, and move on. It's probably not going to work. The Whole Child Collaborative is, I've talked to them and with other districts, and it's going to mean more work for each district. I do not think this Whole Child Collaborative group is going to be able to do all that they said they could do last year. Their first step is, and you're going to hear about this, is suicide prevention. We're going to put posters around the district, all districts, not just ours. And again, baby steps for them. I think they had some broader goals that they just can't do now with COVID. Get future feedback from stakeholders. I was not aware of the thought exchange that Natasha has. I read her report and I actually emailed her about it. That's a really cool thing to do. I'm pretty stupid. As a superintendent, I never thought to do that. It's a really, I think, really innovative, and it's been going on in this district for a while, so I'm going to tap into that with our stakeholders. Then the overall impact of COVID in all areas, who knows? We've got, we've got shots coming up, or we've got immunizations coming up. Who knows how long that's going to take to bring things back to normal, whatever normal is for kids. The WCOE is going to continue, obviously. There's a lot of students who that's much better for than being in school. So I think the impact of COVID on schools, I'm kind of optimistic. I think it might be more positive than negative. I think it's caused schools to look at how they do things much differently. I'm sure Natasha talked to you about that months ago. And I think it's energizing to actually throw a lot of standard practices to the side and think, all right, how are we going to manage it now? And then moving forward. So, COVID's a bad thing. It's a disastrous thing, obviously. But I do think there's some really good things going to come out of it within schools. But jury's still out. Ongoing needs assessment, obviously, I want to get into that because I'm not fully aware of all of the district procedures and all of the needs and all the buildings. And then continue to identify barriers, both internal and external. Those are not a bad thing. The barriers I'm talking about are just barriers of trying to form people together who haven't been together before, and pick some people's brains who really they haven't been consulted before. So that's what I mean when I say barriers. They're not negative things. It's just things that I need to overcome. So that's my presentation. Thanks, Dan. Any questions? Are moving forward, the last thing, sorry, Dan, is I'm kind of moving throughout this presentation and going over a lot of things, skipping slides. So this moving forward is just, it's my thoughts on where we want to go, where I want to go, and where our team wants to go. So again, focus on long-term goals with the wellness team, revisit the social-emotional learning pathway, which I think is the biggest thing to overcome for our students right now. And then diverse learners' unique goals, unique needs, develop a plan to improve progress monitoring, which I mentioned is something we need to focus on. And then align the district to the whole child framework, which is social-emotional. So I didn't mean to skip this slide. I just been over this stuff earlier in the presentation. So any questions on this? I mean, if you do, you can call me, email me, I don't care, and I'll come back to the board and explain our progress as the month goes on if you want me to, or if Natasha wants me to. So thank you.
Thank you.
I had one real quick question, because
Yes, sir.
I'm the question guy, you'll find that out soon enough. Going back to the student engagement part, what relationship would we have with Judge Shriver's office, the probate judge, around truancy and
It's
things?
The
I mean,
truancy part of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick Ayers has a really good relationship there. And he's gonna start at the high school, 5 to 10 minute sessions. It's kind of a harsh sounding thing, but he's gonna put out, it's called a warrant for a frequent flyer kid who's habitually truant. So he's sending that out, or going to send that out after Thanksgiving to all of the homeroom teachers, all the teachers. And if that kid shows up, the student's gonna be asked to go see Mr. Ayers. And Mr. Ayers is gonna have a counselor present, probably an assistant principal present, maybe a teacher. They're gonna try and intervene with that student in 5 to 10 minute sessions. And then do follow-ups. But it's just a way, I agree with Nick, it's a way to put a face-to-face and some help for that student in one room. So the court system, I've yet to meet them, but Nick has told me that they're very supportive of West Clermont, and Nick has a special relationship with them.
Yeah,
So
Judge
I'm gonna
Shiver
tap
is
into that.
is great, and his team is great, and we've been marching alongside of them in this work all along. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we couldn't do it without them.
Yeah,
And he really does listen to our challenges, because sometimes the law and how it plays out in paper and how reality works don't line up very well.
I'm gonna go on some home visits with Nick. He knows the district, obviously lives here and grew up here. And I'm interested to meet some parents and so on. So he's a good resource and so are the courts. Anything else?
Well, I was going to say that Mr. Ayers has been with us for years.
Pardon?
I was going to say Mr. Ayers has been with us for years, and he is well-connected,
Yeah.
and he is excellent at building relationships with kids and getting their buy-in. So the fact that you've chosen him to help you lead that initiative is just outstanding.
I'm telling you, I met him in August, up at the high school, and I was struck with him immediately, with his passion for kids.
Yep.
And it was funny that there's some crossover families between West Clermont and Reading that I knew, that I worked with in Reading, that were truants, and that moved back and forth between West Clermont and Reading. And so Nick knows those families. He knew the same grandmas and grandpas that I knew. And he knew where they lived here, and I knew where they lived, said they lived in Reading. So I was struck by his passion immediately. So, yeah, he's a big resource for us. And he has some very, very creative ideas on how to keep those kids in school. And his ideas align with mine I'm a firm believer we need to change the schedule for those kids. I've seen it work in my former district and other districts, and Nick is absolutely 100% on that. So his presence in that high school is going to help sell that idea.
Good.
So, anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is really, it's just me sharing our ongoing planning and preparation. I guess we're in the phase where we've always been planning to pivot. We've always been readying in the background, hoping that we could stay in 5 days of instruction as long as possible. And we did come to a moment this week. So what I want to do is just bring you up to speed as to where we are and how we move forward. So Dan, are you able to pull that up? You'll see as he gets the working assumptions slide up, the way we were thinking in the summer is still very true, that we are operating very differently educationally and operationally, that we have created a responsive plan to our situation here, and guidelines have continued to change throughout the year, both externally and internally. And we've made an emphasis to make it clear that families need to be prepared to pivot throughout the school district, knowing that there could be changing conditions. And so we just know that that's a burden, and it's been a reality that we all have to face, and we're just appreciative of everyone's efforts to to make those things come to life. And clearly, as we always say, we are better together. And I'm just so grateful for the Board of Education support, the community and the family supports. I mean, even though this is a trying time, I can't tell you the amount of emails that I've gotten or text messages I've gotten even over the last 24 hours of just thanking us, encouraging us, and knowing that we are going to continue to persevere. So I'm proud to say that together we can create a safe learning environment. That was a real question for us coming into the school year. Like, we had all these plans in place. Were we going to be successful? And we can say strongly and confidently that schools are probably the safest place for children in this arena of COVID-19 in our world. And so we are proud to be that safe place for our students. And we've often said, if we're going to have challenges, it's going to be on the operational side. It's going to be staffing. And that's when I talk to doctors and different medical professionals, it's a very similar thing that they're all facing, that these hardworking men and women have been on the front lines since March doing their thing. And it's sometimes people need to take a vacation. Some people are getting ill or needing to be quarantined. And so it's not so much that the hospitals are overrun or that things are at an extreme state. It's the fact that just running out of humans to do the work is the biggest challenge for us in the human industry. So we've done a great job. We're a safe place, and we will always default with the 5-day-a-week plan as our main plan. Now, we did make an adjustment, as you all know, just a couple weeks ago. Our staff, we were starting to see more absences. We were starting to see high levels of stress and anxiety, and just the ability to keep all the gears turning were becoming compromised. So we thought if we made this intermediate step that we could hold us on even a little bit longer. And it wasn't as successful this week as we had hoped it had been, but it did create a relief in our staff, their ability to collectively take a sigh, to do better planning and better preparation for their classrooms. So I think the quality is certainly ramping up because of that, but we weren't able to keep from having to make a drastic decision last night. I do want to talk a little bit about the feedback that we got from families. As you know, we did a thought exchange, and you can get the whole summary of the thought exchange on our website, on the Wolfpack Hub, in the update section. And just to highlight what was meaningful for families, I pulled out just a couple comments. And just throughout, it was just overwhelmingly positive. In fact, I didn't expect it to be as positive as it was. Of families just saying, we are just so glad that our kids are back in school, and they love being there physically with that teacher, and how important face-to-face learning is, that the safety and stability feels good, and that it's a strong, stable environment, that the response time for teachers has been great, that, moving on to the next slide, that the students are enjoying being in the classes where they can be social and get as much normalcy as possible. They're saying that the teachers have been amazing. That just is a theme throughout. That parents feel like things have ramped up this year to the point where in the spring it felt like it was just kind of like completion work, just kind of doing the grind, where it feels like now actual learning is taking place, and that quality of that has really improved. We have a more cohesive remote learning plan than we did in the spring. All the different platforms really confused people, and so they were happy to see that change. I didn't think of this even as we were doing it, but this was mentioned not only in this thought exchange, but in some emails that I received, that having these pre-planned remote days for professional learning keeps the continuity of learning going for students, but it also helped them get ready for this moment that we had today. Just having some practice time away from their teacher, making sure now, do I remember how to log on to that? Do I remember all the places to go? And them being able to come back immediately the next day to get that coaching and feedback and debrief has been helpful. And a parent said that they have a child with an IEP, and in-person learning is the best for them, and it's helping them to grow a lot more than the remote learning option. So overall, extremely positive. You can go on to the website and see all of the responses. And globally, we have a couple responses that we are honing in on. One is equity and access to technology. That has been a #1 priority. It was and always has been. Larry and his team have done a great job. As you know, we are one-to-one with all of our students. They each have a device. And so the next layer that we are focusing on is getting hotspot access in each of our parking lots, in each of our campuses. That was money that was granted through the broadband connectivity grant that we were able to secure. And we also are giving out hotspots to students who are in need. So we're trying to, one by one, take out as many barriers as possible. At this point, we've heard of about 12 students who need that, and we've taken care of those. As more come to our attention, then we will take those. We are blessed here in Ohio because there's a group called the Connectivity Champions that have been deployed throughout the state to lend people like Larry, Parise and his team a hand to actually go in and help make this possible and make this happen in a quick, efficient manner for our families. So we're very proud of that. We've expanded our Wolves Online working days to December 7th and December 14th to give that needed pause for kind of catch-up work for students and some planning and preparation time for teachers. And I know, Mr. Rudy, you experience this every day. The amount of planning and the extra step, like every step, instead of taking one step, it takes 4 steps to do one thing. And it's simple things like just needing to turn things into PDFs, having to take things down to the copier to turn it, because you're trying to make everything that you do digital. And so those extra steps, although our teachers are getting more and more efficient and they are working together, it does create a lot of load. And especially when you're not just trying to do a one-size-fits-all education and learning experience, you're trying to like personalize for students so that we individually meet their needs, knowing they're not all on the same page. So it's extremely stressful and complicated. We're also taking this opportunity and reading the responses and learning from what people have said to figure out what is it that we need here in West Clermont to continue to build the student-centered learning ecosystem. What are all the parts and pieces that you need to be effective, not only face-to-face, but remote in these modern, challenging times? The switch has flipped. Learning is not going to go backwards. And so how do we best equip, not only with skill sets of our staff, but the right kinds of equipment and the tools that they need in their classroom to be very effective, both as they're reaching students outside their walls and the students inside their walls? How do we continue to add partnerships, as Mr. Romano was talking about earlier? We cannot be at a place where we just kind of settle with where we are. We know we have some challenges, so we need to partner with people that will help us continue to invest and take our learning to the next level. And finally, with the help of Jeffrey Ryle and Tanny McGregor, we are leading a new family and community engagement team. We're going to have some staff members, you guys approved that at our last meeting, to join us in that effort, to really dig in and think about that parent experience. You know, parent involvement has always been important in schools, and it's been important here in West Clermont. But it has taken on a new face and a new name and a new way of doing business. And so we can't rest on how it's worked in the past. We have to be more strategic, more intentional in our targeted efforts to support to support families in supporting their children. This is not a teacher alone kind of job. This is not just something a community partner and a school can do together. This is the whole stool. All the parts of the stools need to be there for our students to be able to be successful. So we're excited to kick off that engagement team and to really work at improving the experience from enrollment to graduation. Our Stop the Spread protocols are being very effective, and so I use this opportunity, as Julianne Nesbitt, our health commissioner, has asked, every time you get a chance with an audience, Natasha, please remind them that not only do we need to be doing this in schools, which we've been doing well, but these are things that people need to be at home. It's the effort, because it's what's happening outside the schools that's having the biggest impact on schools. There's no escaping it, clearly, and being vigilant has helped us so far. I will say, we're having a little bit of mask fatigue around here in our schools. It does wear on you, it sucks the energy out of you, and we've just got to continue to incentivize and encourage our students. On our website, thanks to Mr. Jeffrey Ryle, we have the COVID-19 button that takes you every day to a document, or every Friday specifically, to a document that highlights the amount of cases and quarantines for that week. This is updated by 3 o'clock every Friday. It's a layered approach. We do individual communication to the building, to the individuals who have been contact trace, and there are special directions for kind of each different audience. But we do this to be very transparent about what's happening in our school district, and it's, as I said, updated every week on Friday at 3. This is a work of Mr. Lance Perry. He kind of leads this process. Crystal Cooper's been mentioned. She's our contact tracer. She has she signed up for this job and has, she's probably the greatest contact tracer in the universe, it would be my guess. But the challenge is, we continue to get calls like at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And so this is after working all day, having to kick into high gear, call 20, 30, 60 people. So we've asked for Leslie Combs and my assistant, Tina Lupariello, to jump in. And so just contact tracing alone is taking an army of people to get through the phone calls. And the health department is struggling with this themselves. Like they rely on us to do this part well, because they are so overwhelmed and overworked that they're getting to a point where they're not even able to make the phone calls. They're having to rely on email. And so we work very collaboratively with the health department to make this go well. We work very hard to make sure that everybody has the communication that they need. And I'm pleased to say that there are very few, in these numbers, there are very few what you would call an outbreak. An outbreak is when one case links to another. We do have some instances in our schools, but it's a very small number. Usually it's a case from the outside, and that's it. And that's, to be frank, it's one of the frustrations, because families are really getting worn down with multiple quarantines. I heard of a student at the high school who had his first quarantine, his second quarantine, his third quarantine. At the end of his third quarantine, got COVID. So clearly, there's some people who have some unlucky numbers here, and and that's just a huge challenge, because that's a highly, highly disruptive way to roll. And so I just feel for those kiddos, for those families, because it's a sense of loneliness and just kind of fear, like, am I going to get it? Am I not going to get it? And so it just creates angst. Kids are nervous when contact tracers are walking to the classroom like, oh, please don't let it be me, please don't let it be me. And it just creates an anxiety. And these, I just feel for these kids. When I was meeting with Mr. Gephardt and a group of high school students the other day, a student said, Mrs. Adams, I've never been surrounded by more people and felt more lonely in my life. And I think there's just something about having the mask on your face sometimes that just, it shuts down that social chit chat that sometimes high schoolers are doing in between classes, or, you know, in between like lessons with their teacher. And there's just this sense of like doing the grind. There's also the question of, Mrs. Adams, are we always going to be known as the COVID kids? And are we going to always be cut breaks? Or are people going to expect us to be just like everybody who was educated before us, but we didn't have all the same opportunities? And so just that pressure. And so like a kiddo sitting there worried about ACT, passing AP, and just kind of feeling that grind. And so also in that conversation, we had a student raise their hand and say, you know what, I'm part of Hope Squad, and I really want to like brainstorm some ideas. And so can we get together to think about how can we make this whole experience like better on kids, to make them feel more connected, and to make them feel that things are going to be okay. So it's like the challenges were brought up in that session, and at the same time, kids in the class were coming up with solutions. And so that just, it speaks to the quality of kids we have, and to the resilience of this generation, but that our need to wrap around them is significant. So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but to say I'm just so proud of our efforts. We're being very transparent about what's happening here with our cases, and these tools really help parents and the community stay informed. It's just, it takes all of us together working hard to keep our kids in school. Moving on to the next topic is the WCOA. As we all know, we offered the opportunity that midway through the year, you could make a decision to stay in the program or come back to brick and mortar, because at the time when we were creating this in the summer, we had no idea what people would want to do. We wanted to give that option. So as we've gotten preliminary information back, it's looking like it's going to be a very manageable transition. We were very unsure, because if we could have had a massive switch, if it didn't kind of even out, it could have really created imbalances both in our brick and mortar schools as well as WCOA. And so far, keeping my fingers very, very crossed, the deadline is Friday. things are looking really, really good and manageable. And I think that's because of all the efforts of the WCOA team to really listen to each family and each kid and kind of get them situated, even when they, had second guesses early on about their situation. We're very proud of the teachers and the students. I don't know if you guys are following social media much, but they've really been featuring a lot of WCOA, really creative things that they've been doing to like bring in the veterans, for example. They had different veteran guests come in on their Zoom meet. And so all those things that traditionally like bring a school to life, they've been trying to replicate to the best of their ability and in the way that makes sense for their groups. So I'm just really proud and thankful for them. As we said, we've been working to remove barriers through the connectivity grants. And so if anybody needs some help with this, all they need to do is contact our technology team, and we can work to make that happen. So moving on to Together We Can Flex as Needed. This presentation was created before we were in flex mode this week and needing to activate that. Really, the straw that broke the camel's back for us this week was the fact that in every building that had to close, our health centers were going down, not being able to be fully staffed. And I was in a situation in more than one building where you go into the front office and you're looking at the team of people that are normally there, and almost to a person, none of the normal faces are there, and it's all stand-in people. So when you get to a place where not only are there multiple teacher subs across the building, but the office staff is also a cast of characters and substitutes jumping in to help us, as well as the health, you're at a place where you're compromising health and safety of students. And so that's where we were using our backups to our backups, even having our district office team into buildings, taking any role wearing any hat that we needed to, the backups to the backups to the backups were breaking down. And it hit a head yesterday, and so that's why we were in this situation. I don't think we're failing. I think we're doing quite well. There's just when the variables line up in the way that they, or when the stars line up in the way that they did yesterday, we had to make a call. And I do feel for families, just having to hear that message, hear my voice at that time of the hour, and the stress for the next morning. I just do apologize for any of that angst, but just have to emphasize that we are in a pandemic. We are in a situation where we do not control the variables in the ways that we would like to. And so we have to continue to work together. And it is our commitment to our students that we're going to continue to do everything we can to keep them in. But things have ramped up over the last couple weeks because as you hear the governor speaking, as you know that the healthcare system is challenged, we know we need to be prepared for anything. So our teams have been hard at work identifying the 50% capacity plan, which is when we go down 50% capacity, serving our students. And you'll see on the screen, there's some yellow writing. The yellow writing just denotes some changes that happened from the last time that we brought the 50% capacity plan to you. And that is that the elementary and middle school are going to be aligned, and high school is going to be more of an outlier in the 50% capacity plan. And what I want to call to everyone's attention is we keep talking about how what we did in the spring is not what we're doing now. It has a totally different look and feel. Attendance expectations are more robust, active participation from our students. We went through periods of time last year where we said, don't offer any new instruction, just make it practice and rehearsal of things that you've already done. And we're no longer in that mode. We are continuing with new instruction. One of the benefits from today, and you never know what's going to be the silver lining, but a benefit from today is that teachers, when they were having to move to remote learning, were seeing some of their students' faces for the first time. And that sounds so odd to say, but it was just such like a breath of fresh air for people today. And of course, that would never be a reason, but it was just that it's the little things sometimes that keep you motivated, keep you connected as humans. And this continuity of learning is our premium, most important aspect of all this, because we have high expectations for ourselves, we have high expectations for our students, and we've got to work hard to support them to do that. And we also have still high accountability outside of here. There have been no change, like last year, in the spring, things were just being lifted. You're not responsible for this test. We're not gonna do this, we're not gonna do that. Well, at this time, we are still held to high standards when it comes to our assessments. There is no forgiveness, there is no changes. We are to march along as if everything's normal when it comes to the ways that we are held accountable as schools. So it's important that we get really proficient and effective at these, at technology and learning in this way. I do know completely, our teachers are more prepared, our students are more prepared, and we've been able to knock down more barriers than we were in the spring. In the Flex Plan Remote 2.0, again, the middle school and elementary and middle school are gonna be along the same plan, and then high school is going to kind of stand on their own. And the changes that you'll see there, and originally in the Remote 2.0 plan, we had built in a day for planning, preparation, and kind of small group learning. And we have decided that the best way to continue with our students is to continue 5 days a week. So when we are in Flex Plan Remote 2.0, it will be 5 days a week, because we have built-in collaboration time and built-in small group learning time for our students already embedded in the day. And the significance here is that most of our students in the Remote 2.0 will learn from home. Our teachers will teach from school, our learners will learn from home, but we are targeting and bringing in our most vulnerable students, the ones with the highest needs, who need that instruction. And so it'll give this the ability to have smaller numbers, take care of those kiddos that need the extra supports. And again, this is not something that we can do equally for all students when we're in the significant Remote 2.0 plan, but we will be equitable. We are working to provide supports that are gonna help bring success for all students. And this is going to include looking at students on specialized plans like IEPs, 504s, English language learners, students who have parents who are maybe on the front lines and do not have any kind of support, economically disadvantaged. So we're taking a real hard look at anything significant that is a unique situation that would really require that student come to school. And so our teachers will be challenged to not only teach the students who are sitting in front of them, but also the kiddos that will be at home being supported with their families. Because when we move to Flex Plan Remote 2.0, we cannot accommodate all of our students in our schools. In terms of communication and connection, at this time, our schools have been working really hard to make sure that everyone knows who's in the 50% cohort plan, who comes on Monday, Tuesday, who comes on Thursday, Friday, and have been working hard to identify students that if we go into Remote 2.0, transportation for K-8 would still be provided and those students would come in. Additionally, we have some next steps that we are planning, just to kind of keep it on the front of your mind as to like what's kind of brewing behind the scenes to keep furthering our progress. So I've already mentioned the hot spots. We also will be streaming our athletic events. We are on, I know they were working on it today. Mr. Collins just told me he was able to add some extra basketball games that are kind of a little ahead of schedule. He's trying to squeeze in as many as possible. So those will not be able to be televised, but once the original basketball schedule that was created, we will be able to televise those. And so you'll see more and more information coming out about that. We're also on a waiting list for a camera in the auditorium, so that we'll be able to watch our swim meets. That was in a high demand piece of this, and we're on the list, right, Mr.
We're on the
Ramona?
list.
So we don't know exactly when that timeline will be. We're gonna continue to balance our focus on academics and social emotional learning in our flex model as well as WCOA. And this is something I'm emphasizing highly with the principals. There's some concerns that I have with this. It's just things I'm seeing in my personal life as well as in my professional life, that I'm seeing kids go onto screens and there's just black boxes. People aren't showing their camera, they're not engaging, and there's always reasons why maybe you don't want to show your camera for a minute, but the kind of learning that we need to do needs to be as human and as interactive and as engaging as possible. And so to think that a kiddo is sitting all day staring at black boxes is very unsettling to me. I was actually interviewed recently by some college kids, and when I got on the screen, like everybody was in a black box, but me and another adult or two. And it's like that's really hard for me to imagine, like what my days would feel like, day after day after day of black boxes. And so although that's a small little thing in the big scheme of life, I think it's representative to the importance of us really checking in with our kids. Are you with us? Are you doing okay? Because it manifests differently in every kid. And so it's having those deep relationships are going to be the most vital thing that any of us can do with our children, with our students in this time. And I feel like I'm sounding preachy, but it's just the more you think about the impact to these kids and you know, what can we control, what can't we control? It's important that we all understand, like, these are the little things that I can do, and the little things add up and they make a difference, and it's important for us to take those steps. We're going to continue to prepare for second semester. As I said, scheduling is going to go better than we anticipated, so we're very grateful for that. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that all moves well. We'll continue to plan for the professional learning in the spring as well. And we're going to continue to take a hard look at what I've said before. What practices are working really well for us? What practices are old, just need to disappear, go away, and never be replaced again? And how do we better equip our staff and our students and our classrooms with all the needed resources that they need to do this well? We cannot halfway provide a modern learning environment. We've got to be all in on ensuring that we have everything that our students need, and we just can't settle. These kids are going to have lost enough in what's happened over the course of the spring and even into the fall, and so we've got to do everything we can to make that learning environment robust. Why are we here? Because we commit to excellence with every learner, every day, in every way. We are not doing the same thing with every kid. That's not what I'm standing here to say that we're doing. We cannot do the same thing for every kid, because every kid comes to us differently. They come with a story, they come with a family, and a life outside of school that certainly impacts school. And we have got to wrap ourselves around those kiddos and do everything in our power to influence the success of that student. And here, as I always end these presentations, we are going to continue to be responsive and communicate with the families. We started with a video at the beginning of the week to say, we are preparing for a shift. We didn't necessarily know we were going to be shifting this week, and we didn't really want to shift this week, but the conditions were such that we had to. Right now, we have a plan through the 2 days before Thanksgiving. Following Thanksgiving, there's a lot of different schools that are beginning to shut down for a week or so. We're not in that mode at this point. The data is not telling us that's what we need to do at this point. Our intention is to still come back after Thanksgiving. Now, factors could change, and that's the thing that I just have to make sure that everybody understands, that we need to be prepared for anything, but we will follow the data, we will follow the numbers to guide what we're doing, because we believe being in school is the safest, best place for our kids. It's just when we hit that breaking point of we can't operate, it is what it is. And that's where we were this week. So I don't want to let the foot off the gas on our commitment to our students and what we can provide, and our responsiveness to being able to bend and flex as needed. So do you guys have any questions? I know that was a lot.
I have a question.
Okay.
What's our do we have a process in place for our families during the holiday week, the long holiday next weekend, and a family member or a student or someone contracts COVID or is symptoms? How can they communicate with us?
Yeah, that will go through the, it goes through the health department when they are identified, like through their doctor. So that's how the names would be
Okay.
received. And then we get calls like on the weekend, and our contact tracers move into action. So we aren't expecting that operation will shut down. It'll be continuing. There might be some, it might be a slower process and might look a little differently, but that's what's expected. And that'll be something, I will have meetings tomorrow with Clermont County Health Commissioner and the superintendents and Hamilton County tomorrow. So it might be that we end up having some meetings during that week that aren't quite scheduled yet. So that might be another touch point for me to kind of get the lay of the land of what's happening all around us and how schools are responding. it's not like we're trying to be like other schools. It's just always helpful to kind of understand creative approaches that people are taking and things that people are thinking of. So that's why we try to work really collaboratively as superintendents.
I have a couple questions. First one is, how is child nutrition affected during remote 2.0?
Right now, they are prepping to be able to provide food for pickup on Monday and Tuesday of our students who are not in. So they are pretty quickly able to get their system together for this moment right now that we just had, the Thursday, Fridays, that will end up supplying food throughout the Thanksgiving week. So they're going to be able to go above and beyond on that.
Very good.
During Remote Learning 2.0, Tiffany McLeese has a great system. It's even streamlined even better than the spring for people to be able to let us know what they need and for us to be able to provide that. So I don't have all the particulars of like the locations and all that, but we've been able to prepare for WCOA students as well as our face-to-face students, and they are actively working right now to be able to have some food prepared for next week.
Very good.
Yeah,
And
and
my
they've
second
just
one-
been excellent.
My second question is on, with technology and assistance when we're on remote 2.0 and, you know, that there's an issue where the student's at home versus in the school and could maybe have something, you know, have some assistance right there. I mean, how does that?
We have a hotline, and we have an email address where you can report up problems, and a hotline for speed. So Larry is working hard to kind of convert his team. There's a portion of his team that's already been doing that with WCOA.
Right.
And there have to be Johnny on the spot for them because it's real time and it matters more because there's no other way they can communicate if they don't get somebody there. But now kind of expanding those services to a wider range. So I don't know, were they busy today? Did it
I
pick up?
actually communicated with Mr. Meese, who mans the primary line, but we have two other technicians that are standing by in case the volume picks up, and we have multiple phone lines that it rolls to in case the call volume hits, and Mr. Meese was able to handle the volume himself.
Very good.
So far today, it went very well. It was a lot of logging in questions and those kinds of things.
Knock on wood.
I know.
And I know that you, we always bring up the, and it's extremely important about the social emotional well-being of our students, but I think the social emotional well-being of our staff is very important as well, which is why I was on board with the additional remote learning days, the 4 additional remote learning days, and just, you know, I'm sure I'm gonna get this when I get home, but in my house, you know, happy wife, happy life, and I think in the school, you know, if the staff is stressed, that's gonna trickle down to the students, and if the staff can be more calm and more relaxed and have everything together, then that will help keep the kids calm and all that. So I think, you know, the social emotional aspect for everybody, students and staff, I think is equally important. So
It is,
Yeah.
and we've been working, I will say, there was a collective sigh throughout all of West Clermont when we were able to move to those days. I had lots and lots and lots of staff email me and thank us for taking this action step to help them. Many of them said, Natasha, this is the first time since August where I haven't spent the entire weekend getting ready for the week. And so it just gave them like a minute to like breathe and be themselves on the weekend and be able to come in. And so they've been working extremely hard. As I said, every step seems to take 4 extra steps to complete. And you're right, when they're not able, and teachers are perfectionists, and they like the ones that like, it's like me, there's red in their neck when they're moving their hands and they're talking and they're intense. It's because they want everything to be perfect, and they're trying to control every last thing. And this is the lesson learned in all of this, is like, we just can't control everything. And so it's like, we try to give them grace and give them like a sense of like, we're here for you, but you gotta let yourself have some grace. Like, you gotta give yourself some moments here. I've been talking to staff, even like health centers, saying, we need to work so that these ladies can go outside. They need 5 minutes of fresh air, sunshine. Like, we've got to continue to, it's the little tiny things. If it's taking a Starbucks to their desk, whatever it is, we got to keep doing the little things to take care of each other. Because there's going to be no miraculous, there's no magic easy button that makes this all go away. but we can take care of each other in small ways every day, and that's what we're trying to stay committed to. Thank you for saying that, Dave.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and again, thank you for your support. I just feel so privileged to serve here, to serve with this board, and to continue to work to serve the students of West Clermont, because I feel like it's really going well, and even though this week has been extremely challenging, I'm very, very proud of the efforts of our students, our staff, and our families. Okay, so we have superintendent committees, 5.09. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share? I don't think we had it. I'm trying to remember if we had any between. We squeezed them all in before, so.
Since October.
Okay, then we're good. Item 5.10 is superintendent's comments. And I would like to just say I got to represent the school district today at the Child Focus brand reveal. So it was really amazing to be with some other Clermont County partners that I haven't seen since March. We were in the same room, socially distant and following all protocols, but it was just so nice to be around humans in Clermont County this week. And the energy around Child Focus and the changes that they're making, I mean, it is electrifying. And it is just to see the leadership and the passion that Mr. Carter has certainly been the spearhead of all of these years, and has just poured into the leadership that is now kind of picking up where he left off and taking it to new heights, is just awe-inspiring and a huge benefit for our school system that I literally don't know where we would be without Child Focus. And so we're very proud of them and happy that the brand reveal will be coming out for all of you this week. Or I guess it's next week now. I'd just like to say that our thoughts and prayers go out to any family who is struggling with illness, COVID. I know there's a lot of sadness and stress and just not feeling so hot. I mean, we have members of our own team who are not with us. Like it's certainly a challenge, and so our thoughts and prayers go to all those families, and we just pray for healing and quick recovery. Special thank you to the fall coaches. We made it through the fall season heroically. Unbelievable level of detail. And I would tell you, if there's any group of people dedicated to making something happen, it was that group. And it's just, you wish everybody had the zest for life and for whatever they do in the way that the athletes and the coaches took this matter seriously. And so we are working hard to get the winter sports up and running as well. Like, it's all full steam ahead. And that's one thing that, Mr. Gephardt and I were talking about. Like, we are going to put every effort into keeping our athletic program strong, keeping our extracurriculars. And it might seem in contradiction to be like, well, if you're not doing school, why are you caring about that? Well, these things, that of athletics, arts, activities, this is what brings some kids to life. And this is their social group, and this is their connection. And this could be the lifeline that keeps our kids okay. And so we are not looking at it as academics is the only thing. We're saying the whole child is important, and we're going to do everything we can to keep all parts of their life up and running as best as possible. And again, I thank the leaders of this district for just their extra efforts to stay calm and to stay courageous in our efforts and the hard decisions that we have to make, because our team is just doing an incredible job. And the support, as I said, getting emails from families today, knowing we had hard things that we had to do yesterday, families reaching out just saying, we know this is tough, thank you for all that you're doing. It just does wonders for our staff. Our, several principals today did surveys to find out, like, so how did it go? And they just found, just got a temperature check. And just the teachers that are looking to see those positive silver linings. I mean, it's just so refreshing, and it really just speaks to what did you say? You said it's first you got to believe. No, what was the first one?
Well, first there's hope.
Yeah, first you got to have hope, then you got to believe, and then you got to have the will to do it. Yeah, and so you're seeing that play out right here with our efforts to serve our students, and so we're committed, and that's just what I wanted to make as my final word tonight. So thank you for your time.
All right. Board business, Start with Mr. Chumley.
I love how, even though things pile on more and more every day, how we stay committed and diligent to the future of West Clermont. That's just something that I find very fascinating, especially how tough it seems every day. It seems like it gets worse and worse.
Thank you.
I had the honor of coming for West Clermont to the OSBA Delegate Assembly, which was pretty neat to see how things run on the state level. I wish I could actually be there in person instead of just sitting there in front of my computer again, but maybe next year. That's all I have to say.
Mrs. Delaney.
This is the time of year when we're giving thanks, and I am thankful to be up here with being four amazing people and a whole entire leadership staff, and our district staff, and our volunteers, and everyone that makes the wheels turn here. I said this to Mrs. Adams yesterday, it's not without valiant effort that we made it to November the 18th in person. I have other friends that around the United States that have family members that are educators, and I share what we as a school district are doing to keep our community engaged and our students in school, and they're just in awe because they're not getting that support from their districts. So kudos to everyone from, our residents all the way to our administrators. We have something to be thankful for. This is semi-normalcy for a crazy year, and we just have great things to look forward to in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Schaaf.
I also want to thank my four fellow board members and Mrs. Adams, Mr. Romano, and your staffs. I know that we often tout that we have one of the best leadership teams, I feel, in the state, and I'm sure we're a little biased, but, and then there's no way you think that we could get better, and then, we bring on someone with the caliber of Mr. LaFada to help focus our efforts and make us even better. And so kudos to you, Mrs. Adams, and your team, and always keeping the focus on educating the children and how can we best do that, and creating those contacts. And you're doing a fabulous job. The team's doing a fabulous job. I do appreciate everybody's efforts. And I think you brought up earlier, or someone brought up earlier, about mask fatigue, and it's it's a thing. I mean, it's, I work from home now most of the time, and I don't have to wear a mask a lot, so going out and having to put the mask on is like, ugh, imagine, it's hard for me to imagine, someone who has to wear it 8-9 hours at a time, and I'm like, how can they do that? So kudos to everybody in that, this is the time of year where you just want to throw the mask off and get together with family and friends and celebrate the holidays, and we just got to think of the consequences, and it's so easy to just throw caution to the wind and it'll be fine, nothing's going to happen. But if we just stick to our guns, then hopefully come the spring, things will turn the corner and we'll be better for it. I want to say that I know we'll talk about our December meeting, but if things continue how they seem to be going, if we have to move to remote for our December meeting, I'm all for that. But I think that's all I had down in my notes. So thank you all, everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Rudy.
Thanks to everybody for everything. That sums it up.
Short and sweet. I'm in a unique situation of having a junior at the high school, and much of what you said in your update was exactly correct. I saw a lot of kids with the black squares on the screen and teachers reminding them, I want to see your face, I want to see your face. I've not seen your face. I need to see it today. And encouraging that. So I love the idea of, and fostering that idea of let's look at each other, not the squares. I was quite impressed with our staff today. I moved my son into my business office so I could keep an eye on what he's doing to make sure that his focus was indeed on academics. And I was impressed with our teachers. Specifically, there was one that took the first 10 minutes to ask, how's your day? What's worked well for you? It was third bell. What's worked for you well online this morning? What's been a challenge for you? And she listened to try to figure out what can I do better to make sure that I'm meeting their needs. And I thought that that was great. She also had short conversation about somebody's puppy being in the picture, and they all Googled about that. And then she said, I guess 10 minutes into the class, okay, we've got our howdy doodies, let's get to business. And I thought that that was great, that she addressed every need of the student, not just let's go. I thought that was great. So I think our staff is rising to the occasion, and I think that what I saw today was just a small sliver of it, but it's going the same way throughout the district. So kudos to our staff for that. Other than that, I have nothing further. Do we have a need to go into executive session for anything?
We do not.
Nope, okay. Do we have a motion to withdraw?
So moved.
Okay, to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Rudy, a second?
Second.
Mr. Chumley? Roll call?
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes,
Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
5 yes.
motion approved. Thanks for joining us this evening. Our next board meeting is December 14th.
December 14th, yeah.
Yep, okay, thank you, and good night.